I've played a lot of Assassin's Creed in the last few months. I've fought Crusaders, I've danced through Italy, raged against riders in America, sailed the Caribbean, singing shanties and burying friends. I've even been a confused Templar. But now I find myself in Paris. I walked in the shoes of Arno Dorian, someone who, in some moments, I loved, others I hated, and most days, like today, I felt nothing for. The streets of Paris mesmerized me at first. The density and liveliness of the crowd spanned across my screen like a vast ocean of excitement, and I dove in only to find myself hitting the bottom. The parkour has an unmatched flair here, something not seen before or after an Assassin's Creed game, which is beautiful to look at until you're just really trying to get somewhere.
Go up, Arno!
The story returns to a true Assassins versus Templar tale until it doesn't. This is a true roller coaster of a game, and for every up there's a down, but I'm going to try to unpack it all over the course of this essay. All you need to know is that this is part, whatever, of my series exploring Assassin's Creed in the lead up to Assassin's Creed Mirage, and there will be no restraint on spoilers, so if you'd like to join me as I decide if I like Assassin's Creed Unity or not, come along. So, how do we define the gameplay in Unity? If I had to pick a word, I'd probably say slow, both the combat and the navigation. This isn't actually a bad thing on paper. I've very much been in the camp of getting closer to the roots of the game, not the spectacle it's moved towards, and when it comes to the assassination missions, I would easily say they're the best in the series. When you get to a target, Arno will take it all in looking for opportunities. I won't lie to you, I'm not very good at this part of the game, but that's my fault, and the reality is that I enjoyed every moment of it. Outside of when the game mechanics would break or the rules would just seem to change randomly, I always felt like the kills I pulled off, spectacular, stealthy, or a mess, were a result of my action, and I'm super into that. The few times I actually pulled off something I was happy with were great, and this is part of the game I'd be interested in replaying. The rest, however, is a different story. The talking points when Unity came out were twofold, mostly the bugs, which certainly still exist to a smaller degree, but there was also the elegance of the parkour. Altair was methodical and efficient when he climbed. Ezio was youthful and brave, always pushing the boundaries, learning something new. Connor sucked. Edward was a pirate who learned how to climb in the rigging. Arno, though. Arno is an artist. He pulls off beautiful maneuvers that I could never even imagine myself attempting, let alone doing, and when it works, it's fantastic to watch. In my first hours in the game, I loved just moving across the rooftops of Paris, watching Arno turn, twist, and flip from one handhold to another, or moving through buildings, an idea started in AC3 and perfected here. Also, I don't know how this is the first time we had a free run down button, but it was certainly a welcome change. That being said, there's a but in there. You'll be running across a lot of Paris over the game, and that means that you're going to encounter a lot of bugs, which over the course of the game will pile up, becoming more and more frustrating. It reminded me a lot of another Ubisoft title in Siege. The more I learned and the better I got, the more I started to realize how broken the game was. I generally just assume that I'm bad at a game when I can't get my character to respond how I want them to, but at some point I realized that sometimes it seemed that my controller inputs were irrelevant to the moves Arno would make. I take notes when I play these games to help me remember smaller details that I might forget after a week of playing. Would you like to know what I wrote about the movement about halfway through my playthrough? I noted that Arno has a mind of his own, but the problem is that he isn't very bright. Sometimes Arno simply just can't reach the next handhold above him. Sometimes he can. And sometimes you have to move him farther away before he will. What causes this? I don't know, but it's annoying. Sometimes Arno just decides he doesn't want to be here anymore and fucks off. I can't really figure out why he does the things he does most of the time. This isn't really an issue inside of free play because, well, it doesn't really matter. But inside story missions, especially right at the end of a chase, it can be so infuriating watching Arno simply decide to stop participating. The only consolation I can give it is the assumption that in these moments the system isn't working as intended, but at the end of the day this game is almost a decade old and I don't think that's in any way a valid excuse. Speaking of free play, however, Paris is entirely unique when it comes to the series, mostly in terms of crowds. The first game felt cramped because the streets were small, but here it's genuinely spectacular to see the crowd density they achieved here, especially on the hardware that was available at the time. For the first time in the series, getting lost in a crowd really is possible, and it feels fantastic. This does come at a cost, however. I was incredibly excited to see for the first time I could run this game at higher frame rates. I had problems at 165, but 120 I was able to play the game without falling through the floor, so that was enough for me. Unfortunately, Ubisoft still doesn't know exactly how to make a PC port, which means there's no way to change the render distance. At least, I didn't see it in the settings. If you've been following me for a while, you know I may comment on visuals and how much I love them in a game, but I'd never comment on graphics. It's just not really my thing. I don't understand it to a depth that I'd be willing to discuss it. But this game, it has to be talked about. When you're just wandering around, far off buildings being rendered in low res is fine. But when you can see how bad everything looks during a viewpoint synchronization, a moment that was synonymous with spectacular visuals throughout the rest of the series, it's really easy to get pulled out of the experience. This is also possibly the first ever game that has made me stop and look at how bad a texture is up close. Seriously, Ferris said if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Unity is very much the opposite. If you slow down and look around, you could ruin it. Unfortunately, unlike life, Arno doesn't move very fast, or at least it feels like he's always running in slow motion. This ties really well into the crowd events, so let's talk about them for a moment. Remember chasing down thieves or couriers in literally any of the other games? Those dudes were fast and actually required some attention to catch. The ones in Paris could not run a Biggest Loser contestant on the first day of the competition, and that's entirely because if they were as fast as the runners in Black Flag, you'd never catch them. That being said, crowd events are, for the most part, fun only because you can do them at full speed and it rarely interrupts you for more than a few seconds. At least once you get the double assassination, which you have to unlock for some reason, I don't know. Also, the police have a really weird decision-making process. Murdering someone right in front of them seems to be cool, but murdering the guys who did it, not so much. Also, the criminals don't seem to be capable of noticing when the person they're threatening is no longer alive. There's plenty of problems that make running the streets of Paris something that you might not want to participate in, but for me, there's one big one. I despise gear-based progression. I hate not being able to look how I want because I need to pass a stat check. I hate feeling like the game is easier or harder, not because my skill level isn't appropriate, but because whatever piece of clothing I'm wearing or whatever piece of steel I'm swinging doesn't have the right numbers attached to it. There are so few games that get progression right, and Kingdom Come Deliverance is right at the top of my list. Yes, you get better gear over the game, and that helps, but it doesn't make you better, or at least not for no reason. Yes, money to buy a nice sword in that game will make you more effective, but that's because a longsword crafted for battle is better than this blade meant for someone who works a farm. Tell me, with all honesty, why did the game go from challenging to comically easy when I switched from my starter sword to this one? No, really, please, tell me. When Henry upgrades his armor, it becomes harder to kill him because he goes from a kid running around in leggings and a shirt to an armored knight adorned with padded gambeson, mail, and plate steel to protect him. Tell me why Arno's health goes up because he swaps from this shirt to this one. And yes, I know there are options that have a breastplate, but you know that they don't make anywhere near the difference they should. I know it's a stupid thing to rant about, but I have a point, I promise. In my first few hours with the game, I was all over the place, doing mission after mission, from basic one-off assassinations, to defending some woman who wanted all the smoke, to duels around the city, and saving the prince. Sort of. I was joyfully bounding through the world, just happy to have a big new city to explore and upgrades to be had. As soon as I got the cafe that becomes Arno's home, I happily paid for all the upgrades and did all the missions because I enjoyed it. Side note, but all the game's best music is inside the cafe, but we can discuss that later. For hours, I explored Paris doing whatever caught my fancy, occasionally doing story missions that I felt like, but then I realized something. Once I got my new sword, the game got so much easier. The thing is, I gathered so much money so early from doing a level 4 mission that I was still very early on, so I spent my reward on a level 4 sword that made the game crazy easy all of a sudden. So, then I spent my time grinding to get the rest of my gear to level 4, which is where I had a problem. Level 4 gear is between 20 and 30 grand, which is a grind, but nowhere near impossible. Level 5 gear starts well into the 6-figure range and just wasn't worth it. At no point did I feel as though I needed level 5 gear. If anything, being slightly underleveled made combat fun. So I didn't need it for progression, I didn't care how any of it looked, I certainly wasn't going to pay for it through the Ubisoft store, and there was no fun challenges to get it. The only gear you get from doing a long quest is a cool but not very interesting or fitting outfit for solving all the Nostradamus mysteries, which I found boring. So then all of a sudden, the world got very boring for me. I wasn't doing all these missions because I wanted to, I did them so I could afford upgrades. I wasn't exploring, I was grinding. I loved exploring from start to finish in Black Flag. The only reason I slowed down is because I had climbed a lot of the mountains I had decided to. I was happy just sailing around and enjoying the fruits of my labors. In Unity, I stopped because I didn't have any reason to keep going. Once I realized I didn't actually like Paris, it lost its magic for me. I I don't want to have a negative tone here. I really don't. But I just felt like Unity was this ocean that I was so happy to swim in until I realized that I could stand in even the deepest parts. Assassin's Creed games always felt like they were just a year of development away from greatness, and I guess Unity just fits that bill. I wouldn't struggle to recommend the gameplay in Unity, but I'd struggle to recommend it if it was more than $10. There was so much potential here, but well, there's always a but in Unity. The parkour looks so fantastic, but sometimes it will get you killed. The combat can be genuinely challenging for the first time in the series, but your ability to properly scale your gear into the challenge will determine if that's true. Paris is a wonderful city to explore, but not once you realize you don't have to. For me, it all just felt like a waste of time now that I'm done with it. The story felt much the same feeling for me, so I guess this would just be a good time to get into that. If this gameplay section felt like I was leading you to some grand finale and now you find yourself a little disappointed, that's about right.
Do you trust me? I haven't changed that much, Elise. I'm still the same boy who distracted the cook while you stole the jam. The same one who helped you over the wall into that dog-infested orchard.
All right. Take me to your brotherhood. I'll hear the raw fare.
Offer maybe a bit stronger.
Unity has an odd story. It's surrounded by Assassin's themes, but in reality, both Assassin and Templar ideology is irrelevant to the story, and I can't decide if that makes the story better or worse. In theory, the force driving the plot is an Assassin-Templar romance between Arno and Elise, but she spends the game hunted by Templars, and Arno spends most of his time at odds with the Assassins, ending the game no longer an Assassin. At least, it's not shown how he gets back in, and if I don't see it, it didn't happen. Maybe I'll have a conclusion by the end. Let's get into it. You begin Unity as you ended Rogue, in more ways than one, as a Templar. It's pretty cool short section in ancient France that really just happens because it looks cool, and it's showing you where you'll find this game's piece of Eden later on, even if it doesn't really matter. We're then pulled out by modern-day assassins to... Do you care? It literally makes no difference to the plot. I'm skipping it. Move on. We then again pick up where Rogue left off as we run around as young Arno, only to come back and find out Shay had killed our father. This is one small detail, but in this moment in Rogue, I passed Arno and Elise, and in Unity, he didn't pass me, which I find annoying. Anyway. Dad dies, and Arno grows up to be kind of an asshole as we first see him trying to steal back his watch he lost gambling against someone. This isn't an original idea, but I hate it. The idea that our protagonist is gambling with something so precious to him and not even out of desperation, but through sheer, pride? Stupidity? It doesn't matter. It immediately takes me out of the character, and it doesn't matter when you try to say, oh, well, everyone knows he's a cheater. Why would you play? This isn't Casino Royale. You don't have to play. God, I'm rambling. This is barely started. This isn't going to go well. Next up, a note arrives, or attempts to arrive, for our adoptive father, who happens to be Elise's father, and Arnold will take on a reasonable attempt to catch him and deliver it, but it doesn't succeed after getting chased out of the party when he gets into a fight with the brothers he stole the watch back from earlier. Instead of trying again, he decided to slip the note under his door and head out to a party Elise is at instead. One really cool note for this is that if you pop on Eagle Vision when you're walking through the party, you'll see all the conspirators who will become your targets highlighted in gold. That's a neat touch. This will lead to the death of Monsieur de la Serre and will generate the guilt that propels Arno throughout the game. I actually like this moment for Arno. He's not the best guy in the world, but he couldn't have known that delivering that note was literally a matter of life and death. He knew not of the war in the shadows because no one had ever told him. No kid would come to the conclusion that his actions could actually lead to someone's death, especially someone he only knew was kind and generous. But the fact that this one mistake would weigh on Arno and guide his direction through life speaks highly of his character and morality. Above all things, Arno was loyal to those who he loved, and I really respect that. When Arno is blamed for the death of Delaserre, he will find himself locked in the Bastille along with a master assassin by the name of Bellic, who takes to training Arno when he realizes he has the sense to see what others cannot and recognizes his father's watch. When presented the opportunity, the two will make their escape and Arno will be invited to seek out the assassins. Before that, however, Arno will seek out Elise only to find out that she isn't exactly the person he remembered, and we get a surprisingly moving scene as we learn that while Arno didn't know about the family he was born into or the one he grew up with, Elise did. This is the moment where Arno learns that the letter he failed to deliver would have saved the life of Elise's father. She asks him to leave, and he will, stumbling into a strange new world. We track down the assassins, and after some weird ritual that reminds me a lot of Batman's League of Shadows initiation in Arkham City, I guess we're just in? The story will pick up after a year of training when we're sent with Bellic on your first mission. With this success, Arno will then complete his first solo mission, and we get introduced to the assassins. I talked about it in gameplay, but I'd like to reiterate that these are awesome. Finding a unique way into the building with something like recovering a priest's keys, stalking your target, looking for that moment to strike, and then moving in for the kill is all incredibly satisfying. Then we get this scene after our kill where Arno watches the target's recent memories, which comes way out of left field. Doing a little bit of searching, it appears that some data book says that it's related to his eagle vision, but it's not brought up how he does it in the game, and I just think it's weird as fuck. One of my favorite parts of Assassin's Creed was watching as the assassin and their target shared a last moment together, with room for an honesty that wouldn't have been believable elsewhere. The level of conversation was lost after Altair and Ezio, but this is worse. Anyways, after this mission, you'll get some BS about Abstergo looking for you that exists only to have these set pieces from different time periods that aren't very cool. This one has you climbing Lady Liberty in a storm. It's boring, moving on. We get the Phantom Blade next, which is awesome. A silent knife thrower that can take down targets quietly at a distance before being given our next target in the King of Beggars, who you will naturally find in the sewers after getting the information out of his second in Les Touches. It's actually a pretty fun mission as we get a fake out that leads us to land in an arena-style boss fight that I made irrelevant by just shooting him immediately. I seriously didn't even realize he was dead. I thought he just retreated until I had fought off the first wave of enemies. With two of our conspirators dead, Arno will report in and be sent to investigate the next lead, a silversmith named Germain, who forged the weapon that killed Delaserre. This will lead you to a warehouse full of guns and your next target in La Fernière, as you learn of some unknown sinister plot he has and move to stop it. This was probably my favorite assassination in the game, as you get to his meeting place early, learn of his plan en route, then pick a place to hide and ambush him. This is probably the most fun sitting around doing nothing I've had in a game, as you wait for him to cross your path and pull off a very satisfying kill. This, while awesome, was a bit of a fucky-wucky, as it turns out the assassin mentors aren't actually cool with you just up and deciding to kill someone. Here's the problem. Why does this guy matter, but all the random guards I kill on a daily basis don't? Arno had info on what he believed to be an imminent attack on the assassin order and took action. They act like this is insanely out of pocket, but I'm not sure I agree. Apart from that, it's perfectly in line with Arno's character. His inaction cost the life of a loved one once, and he is set to never let that happen again. That's narrative consistency in my eyes. They do at least get past it based on his reasoning, so that's cool. You're sent to spy on a Templar meeting, and we learn the Templars will soon move on Elise. We save her, and when she finds herself out of allies with only Arno to turn to, she agrees to meet with the assassins in search of help finding her father's killer. An uneasy alliance is formed, and we head to check in on our pal Germain, who turns out to be more than he appears, both the sage, and leader of the new Templar movement, along with being responsible for the killing of its last Grandmaster, Monsieur Delaserre. Things take a turn for the worse when we go to share this info with the assassin mentor Mirabeau, and find him dead with Elise standing alongside him. We begin an investigation, and while she's an obvious red herring, it is cool that you can accuse her. We'll do a decent amount of detective work and find out that it was none other than our personal mentor Bellic who did it, poisoning Mirabeau when they disagreed over the course the Brotherhood should be on. It's a decently fun boss fight, especially at the end when you'll no longer be given parry window indicators. Unfortunately, while this was an emotional moment for Arno, it wasn't for me. After this, we get the worst time period jump in the game. We find ourselves in occupied France 1944, with our return point being at the top of the Eiffel Tower, and it's seriously just dumb. Just climbing the tower itself is actually pretty spectacular of a moment, and could have been enough, but for some reason you'll find yourself harassed by a set of Messerschmitts who apparently have nothing better to do than fire at some random guy climbing the Eiffel Tower at night. I'd like to comment about how dumb it is that they can see Arno, let alone would try these ridiculous strafing runs, but can I just mention that a literal turret section has no place in an Assassin's Creed game? I get it guys, COD was big at the time, but do something else. I mean, look at this climb. It's actually really cool, but I can't enjoy it because they surround me with reasons to hurry up and leave. I can't believe that the Saboteur had a less immersion breaking and more fun Eiffel Tower scene. This is what I was talking about. With Unity, there's always a but. They could just never quite figure it out, could they? Anyways. With the death of Mirabeau, we find out that he had some risky correspondence with the king that could expose the assassins and are sent to dispose of it, where we bump into Napoleon, which is cool, but outside the next mission where he gives us some info on our next target, it doesn't matter much. We're nearing the end of our list of conspirators, and next up we have the woman who was put in charge of starving France. We'll tail a boat, which is possibly the worst mission in the game, while Elise tries a different route to uncover her location. Arno is relatively successful finding out where the party's going to be. Elise, not so much.
What?
No time to explain! Run!
So we go on this stupid hot air balloon chase that was kind enough to show off all the worst parts of the parkour again and drive me nearly insane. You have a sword in your hand. Why would you put it away to cut something?
Good! Oh, you don't say!
The wind is picking up. You'd better hurry.
Oh my god.
Yes,
Thank you. What is happening right now?
Are you coming or not?
I'm trying!
But, I told you there's always a but, it gives us one of the best scenes between Arno and Elise in the game.
Next time, I plan the escape route. It's beautiful.
From up here, you'd never know the nation is tearing itself apart.
Can things ever go back to the way they were before, do you think?
Do you? After everything that's happened? Everything we've lost?
So that's it then. The course of history forever altered, never again to return.
Maybe we can't go back. But going forward isn't necessarily an ending.
Elise, You cheated.
You took too long.
I love you.
We'll take part in some other cool assassinations that I enjoyed that will lead us to info on Germain that we will take to Elise and go after him. What happens next might surprise a lot of you. It certainly surprised Arno. It was a trap, of course. You weren't going to kill the final bad guy this easily, but when Elise swings in to help and tells Arno to go after Germain, he refuses to leave her side and they miss their chance. This infuriates Elise and shows how different they are. Listen in her own words.
You were given a golden opportunity to end his life and you refused to take it.
To save your life?
It isn't yours to save.
What are you saying?
I'm willing to risk everything to put Germain down. If you don't have the stomach for revenge, then I don't need your help.
Elise. Elise!
These two are so perfectly written and I love watching them bounce off of each other, always with what seems to be the same goal yet so very far apart in their desires. All she cares about is revenge and all he cares about is her. It's fantastic. Arno's day is only going to get worse as the assassins are sick of him acting out on his own and ignoring the Creed. They're right, he only ever cared about avenging his father and not about the Creed, but he never claimed otherwise, so I don't know what they expected. After being banished, he legally acquires and consumes a small amount of wine. Just seems like my mom on a Tuesday night, to be honest, so no big deal. Elise comes to find him because she still does care for him, and she still does need his help. As his first act, he will do something he should have done long ago as he kills Latouche. This mission kind of annoyed me, but figuring out how to get to the assassination opportunity was worth it. You'll hop through one last breach that I cannot be bothered with and head back to Paris with Elise. We get a very fun mission up next, and some parts of it were probably my favorite in the game, and possibly the only time since AC1 I felt immersed enough in the AC game to actually choose to walk place to place because it felt right rather than running. The plan is to discredit one of Germain's top men so that you can get to him and extract the info you need. You'll do that by stealing some documents from his tent and pass them off to important crowd members who would be very curious to know he's plotting against them, along with drugging his drink. Really fun note here, it turns out if you pick something up with a disguise on, it'll play the scene as the person you're pretending to be, along with turning back to Arno if the timer runs out. I thought it was a nice touch that didn't need to be there, but I enjoyed. Done playing CIA, it'll turn out you did a little too good of a job and we'll have to chase down Robespierre and sneak into the place hiding him from the angry mob we created. We get in, and as Arno begins his interrogation, Elise comes in to remind us that 1, we're on a clock, and 2, she isn't one to be fucked with.
Elise!
We don't have much time. Where is Germain?
I will never talk.
Then right.
I mean, holy shit, is she the most gangster character in this entire series? I think so. We head down to where Germain is hiding, and we go into our usual assassination rhythm, but this one is different, as Arno notes that he cannot see any opportunities and that it's a real fortress. But I actually found this to be one of the easiest in the game. I don't know if it's because I just gotten better, if it really was easier, or if that I just looked for the easiest way rather than try to get whatever opportunity they had pointed out to me. You catch up to Germain, who whips out his Sword of Eden, to which Arno has a very valid response to.
What the hell was that?
Chase him down to the catacombs, and we can have what honestly is a pretty terrible boss fight that mostly consists of waiting for him to turn around and then walking up behind him. The ending, however, was a surprise, as both of our characters live up to who they've been the entire time. I think it's better shown than told.
He's getting away.
Wait, I'm almost free.
I can take him.
No, you can't. Not alone. Wait for me.
I'm sorry.
Elise! 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 Elise!
This ending is, for me, fantastic. Revenge plots shouldn't have fairy tale endings, and outside of switching who died, I can't think of a better way to have ended this. That being said, Arno finally fulfilling Elise's request and being the one to leave her under rubble and die tasting Germain while she delivered the killing blow would have been an amazing twist to end it, but I still like what we have here. I wasn't sure how I felt about Arno when I finished the game, and I'm not sure if I still know now, but for what it's worth, I think I like him. His character defines tragedy. He lost not one father but two, and spent his life desperately trying to make up for the mistakes that led to his losses. Arno thought he found a home in the Assassins, only to have to kill his mentor, who had betrayed him and was thrown out for staying loyal to Elise. He wanted nothing more but to keep safe the one person who had in his life, and that was Elise, but he couldn't save her from herself. Watching her chase revenge into her final moment, I can't imagine what it must have been like for Arno. Everyone he loved died in his arms, and to differing degrees, he could be blamed for all of them. He didn't deserve to carry the weight of their lives on his conscience, but we all know that he did. I've spoken before on how I like games without a happy ending, and I guess I'll be adding this one to the list. I like the story here. I made up my mind.
You look like hell.
You look like you want something from me.
That's a fine thing to say after you up and vanished.
You made it fairly clear you no longer required my services.
Don't. Don't you dare talk to me like that.
What do you expect me to say, Elise? Forgive me for not letting you die? I'm sorry that I care more about you than about killing Germain.
I thought we wanted the same thing.
What I wanted was you. I can't bear the fact that my carelessness got your father killed. Everything I've done since then has been to fix that mistake and to prevent it from happening again.
There's a couple of things that I failed to mention because I didn't think they fit in the other sections, so I might as well bring them up now. One of the many interesting things you can find inside the cafe is a study containing letters Arno will receive from Elise over the course of the story. I found them a little easy to miss, and I often forgot to check back for them, but I was happy each time I did notice them. With only 5 in total, they have a profound impact on how I viewed the character of Elise. While I wish that their presence was a little more noticeable, I did enjoy the fact that you're gently guided towards them after the game ends, so it's likely that many players will have some sort of positive experience on the way out. Another thing I failed to mention is the investigations you can take part in across the city. They're good, and I can see why people enjoy them, but if I'm honest, they're not for me, and that's partially my fault. I didn't bother to do them before I hit my wall of disappointment with the game, and that certainly had an effect on how much I cared about them. Generally, I leave stuff like this to the end of the game, and I go back and enjoy it after the story, but it was too late by the time I got around to them. The simple truth is that returning to the game to do a bunch of running around the city, clicking on characters, and firing up the old brain for a few seconds at a time just didn't grasp me in the way that it did for many others. I highly recommend doing them if you play the game, but like most of the other parts of the game, they fell flat for me. I think that overall I have a positive opinion on Unity at this point, but I suspect it's because I haven't played it in a couple of days. It's easy to look back and only see the good when in reality it wasn't so great at the time. My evaluation of Unity remains the same. It's a game of butts. What has changed is that I think now looking back, I'm able to look at the light side of the coin and see all the good that was there. Yes, the parkour is slow and gets very frustrating because it still doesn't work a lot of the time. But some group of people out there took the time to painstakingly animate and script the movement, and it's worth remembering how great it looked when it worked. The story may have felt a little like it had assassins and Templars tacked on at the end, but it was tacked onto a tragic love story about two characters that I ended up really enjoying by the end. I didn't mention it earlier, but I think the music here is some of the worst implemented in the series.
You're right, monsieur. Too much of the king's champagne. Monsieur. Monsieur de la Serre! Monsieur de la Serre!
Sivir, come away! Guards! Help! Murder!
Bon Dieu, he's killed Lord de la Serre.
But the music itself is phenomenal when you actually get to hear it. Unity may very well be the best game in the series, unless you're playing it. I don't have negative feelings about this game, but I sound negative because there's just as much bad to say as good, but it's so much easier to shout about the bad parts. The bad parts make me want to scream, they make me want to throw my mouse and my keyboard and toss my monitor out the window, whereas the best parts leave me quiet and reflective. I was just along for the ride and I was enjoying it every step of the way. I'm extremely curious to hear what any of you who have played the game thought about it. I'm assuming there's some rather strong opinions out there, so sound off in the comments. Speaking of comments, just like last week, drop any questions you have down there and I'll answer them at the end of the next video. You should be able to expect Dead Kings next week with Syndicate the week after that. As always, thank you to anyone who's still listening at the end. I really appreciate you guys. If you're new here, please consider hitting that sub button so you don't miss out on what's next. The channel should be very active through at least October. We've got the rest of Assassin's Creed coming up. We've got Cyberpunk, all of it. It's going to be very exciting. After that, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll finally get around to Outer Worlds. We'll see.
Aliens. I'm talking about aliens.
Anyways, this is Purple signing off. Have a wonderful night, and always remember to smile. Thanks, guys.
Rather, I fear that you have lost so much already, that you cannot bear to lose more. I think that you would let Germain rule France if you thought it would save me. If somehow we both return from this, I will burn this letter. If you are reading it now, then I made my choice there in the temple. Know that I made it gladly, and do not take the burden of it onto yourself. Be at peace, my love, and walk what path you will.